There's a silence that forms deep within us, not the kind that brings peace, but the kind that screams. It begins in childhood. Maybe you weren't abused. Maybe no one screamed at you. Maybe you even had food, clothes, a bed to sleep in, but no one saw you. You were the child that didn't cause problems, the one who colored quietly in the corner, the one who didn't get praise, but also didn't get punished. You became invisible, and that's how it starts. Because children don't need perfection. They don't even need constant praise. They need one thing, to feel seen, to feel like they matter just for existing. But when you grow up without that, something changes inside you. You start to believe that to be loved, you must earn it. You must perform, achieve, serve, please. You become the peacemaker, the caregiver, the emotional sponge for other people's chaos. And every time you put someone else first, it feels a little like love, because that's all you ever knew of it. This is where narcissists enter, because narcissists, whether consciously or not, have a radar. They're not drawn to the strongest people. They're drawn to the most wounded, not because you're broken, but because you have a pattern they can play with. They sense your need to be seen, your hunger for validation, your quiet willingness to bend, to yield, to disappear for the sake of connection. And so they offer what you've always longed for. In the beginning, they mirror your soul. They make you feel like the most fascinating person on earth. They shower you with attention, with intensity, with words you never heard as a child. And for a moment, you believe you've been found. You believe the child in you has finally been chosen. But it's a trick, because what the narcissist gives you, they eventually use against you. They withhold the very things they once used to hook you. They turn your craving for visibility into a leash. They punish you for needing what they once freely gave. And because your inner child still runs the show, you stay. You try harder. You give more. You go quiet again, just like you did back then. You tell yourself it's your fault. You weren't good enough. You were too much. You weren't enough. The wound repeats itself. The child remains unseen. Carl Jung warned us about this cycle. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This isn't fate. This is programming. This is a survival mechanism disguised as personality. You're not weak because you want to be loved. You're not broken because you want to be chosen. But you are still waiting for someone to choose you instead of choosing yourself. And that is the turning point. Because the healing doesn't come when someone finally sees you. It comes when you turn inward and meet the child who waited decades to be acknowledged. When you stop scanning the room for approval and start listening to your own voice. When you realize that you're not a background character in someone else's story. You're the author of your own. To be overlooked is a silent kind of trauma. But once you see it, you can never unsee it. And once you name it, you begin to reclaim your power. You stop chasing narcissists because you no longer chase the illusion of being seen. You see yourself. And that is the beginning of everything. There's something inside you that can't walk away from broken things. It doesn't matter if it's a shattered relationship, a toxic friend, or a partner who keeps hurting you. You stay. You try. You fix. But here's the question. What if your need to fix is the very thing that keeps you trapped? This isn't compassion. This isn't love. This is a wound disguised as loyalty. And it usually starts in childhood. Somewhere along the way, you were made to believe that other people's chaos was your responsibility. You became the emotional janitor, the one who cleaned up after angry parents, who calmed the room when others exploded, who held your breath when someone you loved couldn't hold their own pain. And so you learned, deeply unconsciously, that love meant repair, that love meant absorbing, that love meant sacrificing yourself for the sake of peace. Carl Jung wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. But you try to fix their souls, so you don't have to face your own. You enter relationships with narcissists not because you're weak, but because you've been trained to see brokenness as an invitation. You don't run from red flags. You try to repaint them, because if you can just fix them, They'll love you. They'll stay. They'll see you. But it never works that way. The narcissist feeds on this trait. They know how to bleed in front of you just enough to make you stay. They know how to play the victim, how to cry in just the right moment, how to say, "I'm sorry," with enough sincerity to give you hope, only to repeat the same pattern tomorrow. And deep down, that makes you feel needed, valuable, safe, because if they need you, they won't abandon you. But the truth is, every time you try to fix someone who refuses to heal, you betray yourself. You become the therapist, the rescuer, the life support for a person who never asked for transformation. You don't love them. You love who they could become. And that's the danger. Because the moment you fall in love with potential, you fall out of love with reality. The need to fix what's broken is often the unconscious hope that if I can heal them, maybe someone will finally heal me. But no one healed you back then. No one stopped to say, "You're a child. It's not your job to hold this pain." So you grew up holding pain that was never yours. And now you keep repeating the cycle with lovers, friends, family, even strangers. You're not the villain. You're not the fool. You're the child who was taught that survival means stitching together what's falling apart. But this is your awakening. You were never meant to be a savior. You were meant to be whole. Healing doesn't happen through fixing others. Healing happens when you ask yourself, why do I feel safer in dysfunction than in peace? Why do I equate suffering with love? Why does emptiness feel like home? These questions are terrifying, but they are your way out. Because when you realize that you don't have to fix anyone, you finally free yourself. You break the chains that bound you to people who only loved what you could do for them. And most importantly, you give yourself permission to be cared for, not just useful, to be supported, not just strong, to be held, not just holding. There's a place beyond this pattern, beyond this need. And it begins the moment you stop saying, "I can fix them," and start asking, what broke in me that made me think I had to? You don't speak too loudly. You don't laugh too freely. You don't cry in front of others. You apologize for taking up space. You shrink in rooms full of people. You second-guess your excitement, your opinions, your dreams. And deep down, you worry that being fully you is too much for the world. Where did that belief come from? Maybe someone once told you, you're too sensitive, you're overreacting, you're too emotional, too dramatic, too intense. So you internalize a message. If I want to be loved, I need to be less. Less loud, less emotional, less needy, less me. This is how the fear of being too much is born, not from your nature, but from the world's rejection of your wholeness. Carl Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, but that privilege is stolen when you're taught that your fullness is a burden. Narcissists are drawn to this trait like moths to flame, because when you fear being too much, you'll constantly apologize for your needs. You'll suppress your voice. You'll make room for their chaos. You'll praise their grandiosity while downplaying your worth. You'll stay small just to keep them comfortable. And for a narcissist, nothing is more convenient than a partner who self-regulates in their favor. You might think you're protecting the relationship, but really, you're sacrificing your soul. Because here's the painful paradox. You fear that if you fully express yourself, people will leave. But when you don't, you abandon yourself first. You become agreeable, accommodating, safe. And one day you wake up and don't recognize your own voice. You've spent so long hiding your fire that you forgot it was ever there. And yet, you wonder why you keep attracting people who are cold, who withhold love, who make you feel needy for wanting connection, who punish you for expressing depth. It's because the part of you that fears being too much silently sends out a signal. I'll be whatever you need me to be. Just don't leave. And narcissists, they pick up on that. They feed off it, not because you are weak, but because they know you'll never challenge their spotlight. They know you'll contort yourself just to keep the relationship alive. But here's the thing. You are not too much. You were just given too little space. You are not too intense. You were just surrounded by people afraid of depth. You are not too emotional. You were just raised in a world that rewards numbness. This trait, this fear is not your fault. It is a trauma echo, a learned survival mechanism. But now it's time to rewrite it. Because your truth is this: the right people will not find you too much. They will find you honest. The right partner will not fear your emotion. They will meet you in it. The right relationships will not require you to shrink. They will invite you to expand. But that starts with you. You must stop apologizing for your sensitivity, for your fire, for your intensity, for your depth. You must stop whispering in a world that was always meant to hear your voice. Your fear of being too much was planted by people who were afraid of their own reflection in your power. They couldn't handle your truth, so they taught you to fear it too. But now you are awake. Now, you can feel the difference between suppression and peace, between avoidance and healing. And now you know this. You do not have to choose between being loved and being whole. Real love sees you, all of you, and says, you're not too much. You're just finally enough of yourself. You learn to silence your hunger, not just a hunger for food, but for touch, for attention, for comfort, for love. Because every time you express a need, someone made you feel like it was a burden. So you stopped asking, you stopped reaching, you stopped expecting. And slowly, quietly, you became independent. But not the healthy kind of independence. Not the kind rooted in confidence or self-trust. No, this was the kind born out of neglect, out of necessity, out of repeated disappointments, out of the deep, unconscious belief that you asking is too much and you needing is too dangerous. So you learned to meet your own needs, even the ones you didn't know how to name. You became the caretaker, the strong one, the one who never complains, never cries, never asks for more, and the world applauds you for it. Wow, you're so selfless, so low maintenance. You never need anything, but inside, you're starving. You long for someone to notice that you're hurting, without you having to say a word. You dream of a love that sees behind your silence, of a friend who doesn't wait for you to fall apart before asking if you're okay, of a partner who doesn't shame you for needing reassurance, comfort, tenderness. But you never say it out loud, because somewhere inside, you carry the guilt of needing. And narcissists, they love that, because you don't ask, you don't complain, you tolerate the cold, you rationalize their neglect, you praise crumbs of attention as if they were feasts. You confuse being chosen with being tolerated, and every time you feel the ache inside, that ache that says, I need more, you shove it down. You tell yourself, I shouldn't feel this way. I'm being too needy. I should be grateful for what I have. But you're not asking for too much. You're asking for the bare minimum. You're not fragile because you want emotional safety. You're not broken because you want affection. You're human. Carl Jung wrote, we deem those happy who from the experience of life have learned to bear its ills without being overcome by them. But bearing is not the same as burying. You were not meant to carry everything alone. You were not designed to be a ghost in your own story. And your needs, they don't make you weak. They make you real. But you've been taught otherwise for so long. You've internalized the belief that your needs are shameful, that needing support means you're failing. So instead, you become the strong one. You take care of everyone else. You stay quiet. You stay low. You disappear. And the narcissist sees that and uses it, because when you don't believe you're allowed to need, you'll never demand to be treated with dignity. You'll accept the bare minimum and convince yourself it's love. You'll keep pouring, even when your cup is bone dry. This is how you become a magnet for emotional abusers. Not because you're weak, but because you've been made to feel guilty for wanting what every soul deserves. And now, it's time to unlearn that guilt, to sit with the ache and say, yes, I have needs. Yes, I want love that feels safe. Yes, I deserve care without condition. This is not selfish. This is sacred, because when you stop shaming your needs, you stop settling for people who only love your silence. You begin attracting relationships where your softness is held, where your vulnerability is met with tenderness, where your humanity is honored, not punished. But it all begins with this truth. You're allowed to need. You're allowed to ask. You are allowed to feel. You are allowed to say, this isn't enough. Because love, real love, doesn't demand your silence. It invites your fullness. And it says, you don't have to disappear to be loved anymore. There's a strange kind of loyalty that lives in you, not to people, but to pain. It's the kind of loyalty that keeps you in places that hurt, that makes you defend those who broke you, that whispers, it wasn't that bad, even when it almost destroyed you. And the scariest part, you don't even know you're doing it, because this loyalty doesn't feel like pain. It feels like home. Carl Jung once said, the greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents. But many of us bear another burden, the internalized belief that pain is where we belong. You learned it young. Maybe love was inconsistent, warm one moment, cold the next. Maybe affection came only after tears. Maybe connection meant surviving storms, not finding safety. So pain became familiar, predictable, almost sacred. And you develop a nervous system that thrives in chaos, that confuses adrenaline for love, that equates calm with emptiness. You feel alive in conflict. You feel wanted when you're fixing something. You feel seen when someone is breaking in front of you. You don't chase peace, because you never learn how to trust it. Instead, you remain loyal, not to people, but to patterns, not to love, but to the idea that love must hurt to be real. This is why narcissists feel magnetic, because they mirror your childhood pain with terrifying accuracy. They give you the high highs and the crashing lows. They re-traumatize you in the exact rhythm your body has learned to survive. And so, you confuse the familiar with the right. But loyalty to pain has a cost. It makes you normalize emotional starvation. It makes you defend the indefensible. It makes you stay in rooms where your soul is withering, just because you know the layout. It tells you that healing is betrayal, that walking away means giving up, that choosing peace is weak. But here's the truth. Loyalty to pain is not love. It is unresolved trauma, looking for a home. And you are not obligated to stay loyal to what harmed you. You are not dishonoring your story by choosing to grow beyond it. You're not being cold. You're not being heartless. You're not being selfish. You're simply choosing to end a cycle that was never yours to carry. And yes, it will feel wrong. It will feel empty at first. It will feel like loss, because your body has been addicted to emotional turbulence. It has been calibrated to survive, not to thrive. But slowly, gently, you can rewire that story. You can learn that love doesn't have to come after pain. That connection doesn't have to be earned through suffering. That you are allowed to walk away from chaos, not because you're quitting, but because you're finally waking up. Carl Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And this loyalty to pain, is one of your shadows. It hides beneath noble phrases. I don't give up on people. I'm just loyal. I see the good in everyone. But underneath is the fear of letting go. The fear that without pain, you'll lose yourself. But listen carefully. Your identity is not your suffering. Your soul is not your scars. You are allowed to redefine what love feels like. You are allowed to belong to something gentler, something softer, something real. The first step is breaking the vow, the one you made in silence, to always stay loyal to pain. Not because it was true, but because it was all you knew. Now you know more. Now you remember you weren't born for survival. You were born for peace. You don't believe in unconditional love. Not really. Not deep down. Because somewhere along the way, you were taught that love has a price. That affection must be earned. That closeness must be bought through sacrifice. That your worth is directly tied to how useful, pleasant, or quiet you can be. So you became the achiever, the giver, the fixer, the one who always says yes, the one who asks for nothing and gives everything. And the terrifying part? Most people don't notice, because you become so good at hiding the ache. Carl Jung wrote, if people can be educated to see the shadow side of their nature, they might become a little more humble and a great deal more cautious. But what if the shadow you carry, is the belief that you're not lovable unless you perform. That love is not a gift, but a reward. That if someone truly knew you, the unpolished, unfiltered, unaccommodating you, they would walk away. So you adapt. You mirror. You become what they need. You anticipate moods, suppress your truth, smile when you want to scream. And narcissists, they devour people like you because they don't want connection. They want compliance. And when they find someone who believes love must be earned, they offer just enough praise, just enough attention to keep you locked in a loop of proving yourself. You chase their affection like a mirage in the desert. Every drop of approval feels like survival. You confuse the anxiety in your stomach with butterflies. You mistake the high of validation for real intimacy. And all the while, your soul is starving. Not because you aren't worthy of love, but because you've only known transactional love. The kind that comes when you behave. The kind that disappears when you speak your mind. The kind that rewards silence and punishes honesty. So you learn to hustle, to earn your place in people's lives, to bend over backward to be enough. And when they leave, because they always do, you blame yourself. You ask, what did I do wrong? What should I have done differently? How can I be better next time? But that question is built on a lie. The lie that love must be worked for. You weren't born believing this. You were trained, maybe by a parent who only hugged you when you succeeded, or a caregiver who went cold when you expressed pain, or a world that praised your independence but ignored your loneliness. And now you repeat it again and again because it feels safe, because it feels familiar, because earning love makes rejection feel less random, less painful, because at least if it's your fault, it gives you something to control. But here's the awakening. Love is not a transaction. It is not earned by shrinking. It is not maintained by silence. It is not sustained through constant emotional labor. Love, true love, sees you, not the version of you that performs, not the polished mask, not the helpful fixer. You, and it stays, not because you're perfect, not because you never make mistakes, but because you are human, because you exist, because you deserve it. But to receive that kind of love, you have to confront the part of you that still believes you're not enough on your own. You have to stop proving, stop pleading, stop striving, and just be. That is terrifying, and that is freedom. Carl Jung taught that we must dive into the unconscious, that true healing begins when we confront the invisible patterns that rule us. This belief that love must be earned is one of those patterns, and it doesn't dissolve overnight. It unravels slowly, through grief, through unlearning, through choosing to stay, even when you feel unworthy, through choosing partners, friends, and spaces that don't demand your performance. Because when you believe that love must be earned, you will always attract people who make you earn it. But when you begin to believe you are worthy just as you are, you'll start to recognize love that feels like peace, not pressure. You will learn to rest, to receive, to stop over-explaining, to say, I am enough, and actually believe it. So here is your invitation. Break the contract, the invisible agreement that says you must bleed for affection, that you must overgive to belong, that you must disappear to be accepted. You are not a product. You are not a performance. You are not a utility for someone else's ego. You are a soul, and you are worthy of love, not because of what you do, but because of who you are. You hold on to people longer than you should, not because you're blind, but because you believe in potential, because you believe that if you love hard enough, stay long enough, sacrifice deep enough, they'll change. You see their wounds. You understand their past. You've heard their stories. And so you stay not for who they are, but for who they might become. This is not naivete. This is survival. This is your inner child, still hoping that one day the people who hurt you will finally become safe. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And one of the most powerful unconscious drives is the hope that love can redeem pain. But here's the painful truth. You are not in love with the person in front of you. You are in love with their potential, with the future version of them that only you can see, the version that might show up if you stay just a little longer, if you forgive just one more time, if you love just a little harder. And narcissists, they know this. They know how to reveal their wounds just enough to keep your empathy hooked. They confess just enough regret to activate your hope. They give you just enough progress to make you believe change is coming. But it never does, because it was never about healing. It was about control. You become addicted to the possibility of growth, to the fantasy of who they could be, to the idea that you were chosen to save them. You confuse emotional chaos with depth, manipulation with intimacy. You mistake their occasional vulnerability for transformation. But transformation requires effort, not tears. It requires accountability, not apologies. It requires action, not empty promises. And the truth is, you are holding on to a ghost, a version of them that lives only in your imagination. You stay because you're loyal, because you see the good, because you believe everyone deserves a second chance. But how many chances have you given at the expense of your own soul? How many years have you spent trying to pull someone out of a fire they keep lighting? And when did you learn that your love must be strong enough to heal someone else's refusal to grow? You weren't born with that burden. You inherited it from a childhood where you had to be the responsible one, where you became the emotional anchor for people who never anchored you, where you developed a gift for seeing potential, because no one ever gave you consistency. So now, you stay in relationships that echo that early pain. You keep hoping, keep believing, keep sacrificing, because hope feels safer than grief, because letting go feels like failure, like giving up, like losing the fantasy you've been building for so long. But hope can become a prison, especially when it keeps you loyal to a version of someone that doesn't actually exist. Carl Jung also said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And sometimes we stay with people who won't face their soul, so we don't have to face ours. Because if you stop trying to fix them, you'd have to confront the deeper pain, that the love you gave wasn't enough to save them, that your presence didn't make them choose healing, that they didn't want to change. And that is a brutal truth to swallow. But it is also your liberation, because your role was never to be the savior. It was to be whole. It was to be free. It was to break the cycle, not continue it in prettier packaging. The person who wants to grow will grow. The one who values you will show it. The one who chooses love will do the work without being begged, manipulated, or rescued. You don't have to be enough for someone to change. They have to want it. And if they don't, that is not your failure. It is their choice. So here is your turning point. Let go of who they could be. Mourn the fantasy. Release the hope. And come home to reality. To your body. To your voice. To your truth. You are not here to wait for someone to become who you need. You are here to become who you need. You are allowed to walk away from someone who refuses to evolve. Even if you love them. Even if you see their pain. Even if it hurts. Because your job was never to heal them. Your job is to stop betraying yourself in the name of potential. Hope can be beautiful, but sometimes it's how we stay asleep. There's a moment right before you speak your truth where your whole body tenses, your chest tightens, your throat constricts, your mind floods with questions. What if they get angry? What if they leave? What if I'm overreacting? What if I ruin everything? And so, you don't say it. You swallow the words. You shrink the truth. You let it pass, again, because somewhere along the way, you were taught that using your voice comes with consequences, that speaking up makes you difficult, that honesty makes you dramatic, that setting boundaries makes you selfish, that expressing emotion makes you weak. So now, you become fluent in silence. You measure every word. You rehearse every reaction. You analyze emotional weather before entering every conversation. And you call it being thoughtful. But really it's fear. It's trauma in disguise. Carl Jung wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And accepting yourself means honoring your truth, not just the beautiful parts, but the inconvenient ones, the messy ones, the ones that might upset others. But you were trained to believe that love is conditional, that it survives only in the absence of conflict, that your needs, your pain, your voice are threats to the peace. So you protect the relationship by sacrificing your authenticity. And narcissists, they feed off this. Because nothing benefits an abuser more than someone who fears confrontation, someone who doubts their own perception, someone who hesitates to speak, and then apologizes when they finally do. You begin to gaslight yourself. Maybe I'm being too sensitive. Maybe it's not that serious. Maybe I misunderstood. But the truth is, you've learned to fear your own truth. Because when you were younger, speaking up led to punishment, not protection. Maybe you were ignored, mocked, shamed, or made to feel like your emotions were an inconvenience. So now, you choose silence. Not because it's peaceful, but because it feels safer than being rejected. But here's the cost. Every time you silence yourself to preserve connection, you disconnect from yourself. You betray your body. You abandon your voice. You tell your nervous system, we are not safe to be real. And slowly you disappear. Not all at once, but piece by piece. Until one day you look in the mirror and realize you've built a life where everyone is comfortable, except you. Carl Jung also said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But you can't become who you are if you keep editing yourself to be palatable. So here is your awakening. Your voice is not dangerous. Your truth is not too much. Your pain is not embarrassing. Your needs are not a threat. You are not here to make others comfortable at the cost of your own soul. You are not here to be agreeable while silently suffering. You are not here to hold your breath so no one else drowns. You are allowed to speak, to disrupt, to draw lines, to name what hurts, to take up space. And yes, some people will call that selfish. Some will call it dramatic. Some will leave. But the people who are meant for you will stay, and they will listen, because speaking up filters out those who only love your silence. It reveals who's truly safe and who's only safe when you're silent. This is not about confrontation. It's about reclamation of your voice, of your body, of your truth. No more apologizing for existing. No more whispering in rooms where you deserve to roar. No more protecting people from the discomfort of your honesty. Because the more you speak, the more you remember who you are. You are not here to be silent. You are here to be whole. Who are you when no one needs you? It's a question that terrifies people like you. Those who have built their identity not on being loved, but on being useful. You're the one who shows up, the one who holds space, the one who carries the weight no one else can. You're the emotional caretaker, the fixer, the dependable one. And people praise you for it. They call you strong, reliable, selfless. But deep inside, you wonder, if I stop helping, will they still love me? Carl Jung once said, the world will ask you who you are, and if you don't know, the world will tell you. And many of us learned early on that being needed felt safer than being seen, because being needed gives you purpose. It gives you a role. It gives you a reason to stay. Even in relationships that are draining the life out of you, you mistake codependency for connection. You confuse enmeshment with intimacy. You don't feel chosen. You feel useful. And sometimes that feels like enough, especially if you were raised in a home where your needs didn't matter, but your ability to meet others' needs made you feel valuable. So now you seek out people who need fixing, who are broken, who are emotionally unavailable. Because their pain gives you something to pour into. You say things like, I just want to help. They need me. I can't walk away. They'd fall apart. But the real fear is that without being needed, you'd be nothing. You fuse your identity to usefulness. You don't feel lovable. You feel indispensable. And narcissists, they love this. Because to them, you're not a partner. You're a resource, a source of attention, of care, of emotional labor. They love that you never say no, that you anticipate their needs, that you disappear into their chaos with a smile on your face. And they never have to offer you real intimacy. Because your role is already defined. Be useful. Stay quiet. Fix everything. But what happens when you burn out? What happens when your soul is tired and you look around and realize no one is there for you? That the people you've saved again and again don't know how to hold you when you collapse? That your value was never in your heart, but in your hands? This is the breaking point. Because the truth is, you don't want to be needed. You want to be loved. You don't want to be indispensable. You want to be chosen. But to get there, you have to let go of the identity that says your worth is in what you do, not in who you are. Carl Jung taught that the shadow isn't just our darkness. It's every part of us we disown to survive. And many of us have disowned our right to rest, to receive, to be seen without earning it. You were taught to be the strong one. But strength is not the absence of need. It's the courage to admit when you have them. And this is your moment of reclamation. You are allowed to exist without fixing, to be loved without solving, to be valued without sacrificing. You are not a healer. You are human. You are not here to be needed. You are here to be known. And yes, this shift will cost you some people. The ones who only stay because of what you could do for them. They will leave. Let them, because the ones who remain will be the ones who see you, even when you're not holding the whole world together. You don't have to prove your worth through usefulness anymore. You were always enough, even when you had nothing to offer, especially then. You tell yourself you're fine being alone, that solitude is peaceful, that independence is strength. And sometimes that's true, but deep down, in the quietest places of your being, there's a fear you don't speak out loud, that if no one is there, if no one texts, if no one needs you, if the room stays quiet, you might not know who you are anymore, because for so long, your worth has been tethered to others, to how they see you, to how they respond, to how they make you feel alive. You don't just fear being alone. You fear being forgotten. You fear that your existence might dissolve into silence, that without someone mirroring you, you might disappear. Carl Jung said, loneliness does not come from having no people around, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to oneself. And that's the kind of loneliness you know best, the kind that creeps in even when the room is full, the kind that grows in relationships where you can't speak your truth, the kind that says, they see me, but they don't really know me. So you cling, not always physically, but emotionally. You stay longer than you should. You tolerate more than is fair. You romanticize crumbs and call them meals. Because even a toxic connection feels better than the void. Even chaos feels better than silence. Because silence reminds you of the original abandonment, the one you never healed from, the one you buried beneath independence and productivity and relationships that went nowhere. So you build a life on noise, on distraction, on constantly being busy, not because you love it, but because stillness is unbearable. Because in the stillness, the truth echoes. You don't feel safe alone, not because you're not capable, but because you never learn how to be held by yourself. And narcissists, they know, they feel it. They offer presence, attention, validation, all at once. They flood your nervous system with the illusion of intimacy. And you confuse that rush for connection. You confuse control for care. Because anything feels better than the ache of emptiness. But here's the awakening. Being alone is not the same as being abandoned. Solitude is not punishment. It's a mirror. And what it reflects is the truth about how much of yourself you've handed away. You fear being alone because, deep down, you fear meeting the parts of you that are still waiting, still wounded, still unheard. The child inside you still thinks that aloneness equals danger, that if no one's around, no one will come, that if you cry, no one will notice, that if you fall apart, you'll be left to clean it up alone. But you're not that child anymore. You have hands now, a voice, a soul strong enough to hold your own weight. And here's the radical truth. You don't need to be surrounded to be whole. You don't need constant conversation to be worthy. You don't need to fill the space to prove you belong. You just need to be willing to sit with yourself, to witness your breath, to hear your own thoughts without fear, to feel your body without fleeing, to love your presence, even when it's not reflected in someone else's eyes. Carl Jung also said, "He who looks outside dreams. He who looks inside awakes." This is your moment to awaken, not through another relationship, not through another distraction, but through the sacred act of being fully, tenderly, fiercely with yourself. Let the silence speak. Let the stillness teach. Let the loneliness purify. Because in that space, you will finally hear the truth. You were never truly alone. You just hadn't met yourself yet. And when you do, the right people will come, not to fill the emptiness, but to celebrate your fullness. You don't need to be afraid of being alone, because the day you learn to love your own presence is the day no one can ever use your fear against you again. You've just walked through 10 hidden traits. Traits that weren't born from weakness, but from wounds, from survival, from love that came with conditions. And maybe for the first time, you saw yourself, not just as a target, but as a soul who's been trying so hard to be safe. Carl Jung taught us that everything we repress becomes the unconscious script of our lives. But now, the script is in your hands. This is your invitation to stop performing, to stop apologizing, to stop waiting for someone else to change so you can finally be free. You are not broken. You are not too much. You are not hard to love. You are simply remembering what was once forgotten. That real love doesn't make you chase it. It meets you, holds you, sees you, but it starts with you. Speak your truth. Sit with your aloneness. Reclaim your needs. Let go of what never loved you, only used you. Because the day you stop abandoning yourself is the day no narcissist can ever control you again. If this spoke to your soul, don't let it stop here. Hit that subscribe button and share this with someone who's still trying to make sense of the pain. Because healing begins in awareness, and awareness begins with truth.